Hi, everybody. Welcome back once again. It is I, Mr. Aaron, and I'm here for part 2 of Stanley in Space. Now, you may remember that when we left off yesterday, they were talking to the president. It was Stanley's birthday, and people back on Earth had just sung him happy birthday through the radio and things like that. So now we are going to continue with the Lamb Chop family's adventure to the far reaches of space in search of the mysterious planet Tira, from which Earth has received a transmission. "Those imitations," the president said, "especially the fella in the phone booth. Darn good." "Indeed," the Queen added from England. "We were greatly amused." "Oh, well, thank you," said Arthur, cheered. The screen went blank. They had traveled too far. There would be no more voices from Earth, no voices but their own, until they heard what the Tirans had to say. "Suppose the Tirans have forgotten we're coming," Stanley said. "We might just sail around in space forever." They had finished the breakfast omelet and were now setting out the Monopoly board, because there was nothing more interesting to do. "They don't even know our names," Arthur said. "What will they call us?" "Earth people," said a deep voice. "Very probably," said Mr. Lambchop. "Earth people seems—" "Wait, who said that?" "Not me," said both Stanley and Arthur. "Not I," said Mrs. Lambchop, correcting. "But who—" "Earth people," the voice louder now came from the Star Scouts radio. "Greetings from the great planet Tira and its mighty people. Do you hear?" "Oh, my!" Mr. Lambchop turned up the volume. "It's them!" "They," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Harriet," Mr. Lambchop said, and spoke loudly into the microphone. "Hello, Tira. Earth people here. Party of 4. Peace-loving family." "Peace-loving," said the voice. "Good. So is mighty Tira. Where are you, Earth people?" Stanley checked his star maps. "We're just where the tail of Ralph's Comet meets star number 3,047. Now what?" "Right," said the Tiran voice. "Keep going till you pass a star formation that looks like a foot. You can't miss it. Then, just past a lopsided little white moon, start down. You'll see a pointy mountain, then a big field. Land there. See you soon, Earth people." "You bet," Mr. Lambchop said, and turned to his family. "The first contact with another planet. We're making history." They passed the foot-shaped star formation, then the lopsided moon, and Stanley piloted the Star Scout down. The darkness of space vanished as it descended, and at last the Lambchop saw clearly the planet it had taken so long to reach. And there they're flying around following the voice's directions. Tira was a smallish, as planets go, but nicely round and quite pretty, all in shades of brown, with markings not unlike the oceans and continents of Earth. A pointy mountain came into sight, and beyond it, a big field. "There!" Stanley pressed the landing button. Went the Star Scouts' rockets. The spaceship hovered and touched down. Peering out, the Lambchop saw only a brown field, with tan trees at the far side and brownish hills beyond. "Curious," said Mr. Lambchop. "Where are—" Suddenly a message came, but not the sort they expected. "Surrender, Earth people," said the radio. "Your spaceship is trapped by our unbreakable trapping cable. You are prisoners of Tira. Surrender!" Chapter 5. The Tirans. Unbreakable trapping cable? Prisoners? Surrender? The Lambchops could scarcely believe their ears. "Well, I don't call that peaceful," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Our president has been misled." "I wish we had gone to the seaside," Mr. Lambchop shook his head. "But how are we trapped? I don't—" He pointed to the magnifying window. "Say, what's that?" A thin blue line, like a thread, had been passed over the Star Scout. Stanley switched on the wiper above the big window, and the first flick of its blade parted the blue line. "Drat!" said the radio. Other voices rose, startled, and then the deep voice spoke again. "Earth people, we are sending a messenger. A regular, ordinary Tyran, just to show what we're like." For long moments the Lambchops kept their eyes on the tan trees across the field. "There!" Arthur said suddenly. "Coming toward—" "Oh. Oh. My." His voice trailed away. The Tyran messenger came slowly forward to stand before the big window. A muscular, scowling young man with a curling mustache, wearing shorts and carrying a club. The mustache was very large. The messenger was not. "That man," said Mrs. Lambchop slowly, "is only 3 inches tall." "At most," said Mr. Lambchop. "It is a magnifying window." The Tyran seemed to be calling something. Arthur opened the door a crack, and the words came clearly now. "Afraid to let us see you, Earth people? Because I'm so enormous? Ha ha! All Tyrans are this big!" Flinging the door wide, Arthur showed himself. "Well, I'm a small Earth person," he shouted. "The rest are even bigger than me." Not me," Mrs. Lambchop said. "And don't tease Oh, he's fainted." Wetting her handkerchief with cold water, she jumped down from the Star Scout and ran to dab the Tyran's tiny brow. Cries rose again from the spaceship's radio. "The giant killed Ick! There's another even bigger! Oh, gross! Look! Ick's all right!" The Tyran, by grasping Mrs. Lambchop's handkerchief, had indeed pulled himself up. Furious, he swung his club, but managed only to tap the top of her shoe. "Ouch! Scat!" she said, and he darted back across the field. "Oh my," said the radio. Never mind about surrendering, Earth people. A truce committee is on the way." Oh. He is bonking her shoe. Whack! At first they saw only a tiny flag fluttering like a white butterfly far across the brown field. But at last the Tyran committee drew close, and the Lambchops, waiting now outside the Star Scout, could make each little person out. The flag was carried by the scowling young man with the mustache and the club. The other members of the committee, a bit smaller even than he, were a red-faced man wearing a uniform with medals across the chest, a stout lady in a yellow dress and a hat with flowers on it, and 2 older men in blue suits, one with wavy white hair, the other thin and bald. The committee halted, staring bravely up. "I am General App," shouted the uniformed man, "commander of all Tyran forces." Stanley stepped forward. "Chief Pilot Stanley Lambchop," he said, "from Earth. And these are my parents, Mr. and Mrs. George Lambchop, and my brother, Arthur." "President Ott of Tyra and Mrs. Ott," said General App, indicating the wavy-haired man and lady. "The bald chap is Dr. Epp, our chief scientist, and the grouchy one with the flag is my aide, Captain Ick." There we go, the first meeting between Earth people and aliens. All you can see is the Earth people's feet. No one seemed sure what to say next. A few polite remarks were exchanged. "Nice meeting you, Earth people." "Such a pretty planet, Tyra." "Oh, thank you. Were you long in space?" And Mr. Lambchop realized suddenly that the Tyrans were uncomfortable talking almost straight up. He got down on his knees, the other Lambchops following his example, and the Tyrans at once lowered their heads in relief. "Right," said General App. "All reasonable people here. A truce, eh?" Well, I'm for war, frankly, growled Captain Ick, but Stanley pretended not to hear. A truce! Good idea, he said. We come in peace. Mrs. Ott sniffed. Not very peaceful, frightening poor Captain Ick. She pointed at Arthur. That giant shouted at him. My son is not a giant, Mrs. Lambchop said. It's just that you Tyrans are, well, how shall I put it, unusually petite. Ick's the biggest we've got, actually, said General App. We hoped he'd scare you. President Ott raised his hand. No harm done. Come, Tyrrellville, our capital, is but a stroll away. The Lambchops, equipped now with the handy magnifying lenses from the Star Scouts science kit, followed the committee. Tyrrellville lay just across the brown field, behind the tan trees, no larger than an Earth-sized tennis court. Chapter 6. Tyrrellville. Gosh, Stanley said. It makes me homesick in a way. Except for its size, the lack of greenness, the Tyran capital was indeed much like a small village on Earth. A main street bustled with Tyrans shopping and running errands. There were handsome school and public buildings, 2 churches with spires as high as Mr. Lambchop's waist, and side streets of pretty houses with lawns like neat brown postage stamps. Captain Ick, still angry, marched on ahead, but the rest of the committee halted at the head of Main Street. We'll just show you around, eh? He said President Ott. Safer, I think. The Lambchops saw at once that the risk of walking streets barely wider than their feet. Escorted by the committee, they circled the little capital, bending often to make use of the magnifying lenses. Mrs. Ott took care to indicate points of particular interest. Among these, Uck's Field, a sports center, Admiral Uck's Square, Uck's Park, and the Uck's Science Building. Mrs. Ott's grandfather, whispered General App, very rich. The tour caused a great stir. Everywhere the tiny citizens of Tyrrellville waved from windows and rooftops. At the Science Center, the last stop, journalists took photographs, and the Lambchops were treated to grape fizzola, the Tyran national drink, hundreds of bottles of which were emptied into 4 tubs to make Earth-sized portions. Refreshed by his fizzola, Arthur took a little run and hurdled a large part of Tyrrellville, landing in Uck's Square. Arthur! Mrs. Lambchop scolded, and he hurtled back. Oh, aren't kids the dickens? Said a Tyran mother, looking on. Mine— stop tugging, Herbert. These last words seemed addressed to the ground beside her. My youngest, she explained. Stanley squinted. I can hardly— he's just a dot.
Dot yourself,
said an angry voice.
Big-a-rooney. You're the funny-looking one.
Herbert, his mother said. It is rude to make fun of people for their shape or size. As I said myself often when Stanley was flat, Mrs. Lambchop exclaimed. If only— Surrender, Earth people! The cry had come from Captain Ick, who appeared now from behind the Science Center, staggering beneath the weight of a box-like machine almost as big as he was, with a tube sticking out the front. Surrender, he shouted. You cannot resist our magno-titanic paralyzer ray. Tira will yet be saved. There's a truce, Ick, barked General App. You can't— There they are, getting the grape fizzola ready. Yes, I can! First— Oops! Captain Ick's knees had buckled, but he recovered himself. Ugh! First, I'll paralyze the one who scared me back there in the field. Yellow light flickered up at Arthur from the magno-titanic paralyzer. Yikes! Said Arthur, as shrieks rose from the crowd. But it was not on Arthur that the magno-titanic beam landed. Stanley had sprung forward to protect his brother, and the light shone now on his chest and shoulders. Mrs. Lambchop almost fainted. But suddenly, her fright was gone. Stanley was smiling. There he is, smiling. The beam splashes onto him there. The yellow rays still flickering upon him, he rolled his head and wiggled his hands to show that he was fine. "It's nice, actually," he said. "It's like a massage." The crowd hooted. "Ah, it only works on people of Tyrion size," someone called. "You're a ninny, Ick." Then Captain Ick was marched off by a Tyrion policeman, and the crowd, still laughing, drifted away. Mrs. Lambchop spoke sternly to the committee. "Tira will yet be saved. What did Captain Ick mean? And why, pray tell, did he attempt to paralyze my son?" The Otts and General Epp exchanged glances. Dr. Epp stared at the ground. "Ah," said President Ott. "Well, the fact is we're having a crisis, actually. Yes, and Ick, well, he,
Oh, tell them,
Mrs. Ott burst suddenly into tears, "about the Supergrow.
tell them, for heaven's sake."
Puzzled, the Lambchops stared at her. The sky had darkened, and now a light rain began to fall. "Whitish, eh?" said General Epp. "Can't offer shelter, I'm afraid. No place large enough." "The Star Scout will do nicely," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Let us return to it for tea." Chapter 7. President Ott's Story.
"Oh, tea does help. I'm quite myself again."
Mrs. Ott nodded to her husband.
"Go on, dear, tell."
Rain drummed faintly on the Star Scout, making even cozier the scene within. Around the dining table the Lambchops occupied their usual places. The Tyrans sat atop the table on thumbtacks, pushed down to serve as stools, sipping from tiny cups. Mrs. Lambchop had fashioned from aluminum foil, and they were nibbling crumbs of her homemade ginger snaps. Now, sighing, President Ott set down his cup. Sorry. I got chair and cup mixed up there. You will have observed, Lambchops," he said, "how greatly we have enjoyed these tasty refreshments. The fact is, Tira has for some time been totally without fresh food or water fit to drink. We live now only by what tins and bottles we had in store." Mrs. Ott made a face.
"Pink meat spreads and spinach, and that dreadful fizzola."
"A bit sweet, yes," said General Epp. "Gives one gas, too, but—"
"Oh, never mind,"
cried Mrs. Ott. President Ott continued. "The cause of our tragedy, Lambchops, was Supergrow, an invention of Dr. Epp's. Supergrow, he promised, would double our crops, make them double sized, double delicious as well. A great concept, he said." "We scientists," said Dr. Epp, "dream larger than other men." "For 3 days at the Science Center," President Ott went on, "Epp brewed his Supergrow. Great smelly vats of it, enough for the whole planet. But then, oh no Tyrion will ever forget that 4th day. I myself was strolling through Ox Park. How beautiful it was! The trees and grass so green, the sky—"
"Green?" said Arthur. "But everything's brown here, not green."
"A mishap," murmured Dr. Epp, "with the Supergrow." "Mishap?" barked General Epp. "The stuff exploded, Epp! All over the place!" "Well, nobody's perfect." Dr. Epp hung his head. "All those huge vats, Lambchops," President Ott continued. "Boom! One right after another. Shattered windows, blew the roof right off the Science Center. No one hurt, thank goodness, but great clouds of smoke darkening the sky. And then, such dreadful luck, it began to rain. A tremendous rain mixing with the smoke, falling all over Tira and into the rivers and onto every field and garden, every bit of greenery." Rising from his thumbtack, he paced back and forth across the table. And when the rain stopped, there was no green. None. Just brown. Worse, Epp's tests proved that our water was undrinkable, and that nowhere on Tira would anything grow. I broadcast at once to the nation, "Do not despair." I said, "Tira will soon recover." "Oh, good," Mr. Lambchop said. President Ott shook his head. "I lied." And that's where we are going to stop for today. And we will pick up there tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so I hope you guys will join me again then. Of course, be sure to tune in for our other live programs that we have going on right here on the Sweetwater County Library System Facebook page. There is, of course, Toddler Time with Miss Becky, and there's Stories with Sunny with Miss Sunny that are happening, so be sure to keep an eye on the Facebook page and join us for those. And, of course, don't forget about our digital resources that we have, Hoopla and Overdrive and RB Digital and all of those great things, so you can still get library content through your devices at home. It's great stuff. Again, thank you guys for joining me. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you tomorrow.